Welcome to Locally Speaking, a podcast where local elected officials chat about the municipalities and regional districts that make up local governments in British Columbia and how we manage to get anything done at all. I'm Brenda.
And I'm Alton. And in today's episode, we're having a conversation with retiring NDP MLA Nicholas Simons. First elected in 2005 to the riding of Powell River-Sunshine Coast, Nick has served in both opposition and in government. Not only has he served as a backbencher, he also spent a period of time as the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. Currently serving as the NDP caucus chair, you might even say he's seen a few things.
After 19 years in provincial politics, Nick is retiring as MLA. We wanted to take some time to chat about what work at the provincial level is like and how that work dovetails with the everyday work of local governments. Thanks for joining us, Nick. Let's start out by you telling us what inspires you to enter politics in the first place and how has your perspective changed over the years?
Well, first of all, I'm really happy to be with you guys and talk a little bit about the last 19 years. And yeah, I can remember when I first got into politics, I'd been working at the Seashell Nation for quite a while and working in child welfare. And I was noticing that child welfare, the system, needed some help. The government of 2001 eliminated all oversight of child welfare systems, and I saw that as a big problem. And actually, the previous government hired me to review the death of a child, and what I found in that investigation were a lot of gaps in the system. I thought, well, maybe a voice of somebody who's had some experience in the sector would be helpful to government. And it sort of happened that at the same time, the party was looking for someone to run. And that was for the federal election in 2004. So I said, okay, that sounds like an interesting project. They all said, no, there's no chance you're going to win. And because, West Van, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky. I think at the time the riding went all the way up to Pemberton and Powell River. But it was a really interesting experience. And we did, well, I could say quite well compared to the time before. I think it went from 9% to 23%. And I guess the party saw that I won the Sunshine Coast portion of the riding. And Dave Barrett actually said to me I'd be expletive if I didn't run provincially. So I took his advice and put my name in the ring and got the nomination on the 5th ballot. So there I was, the candidate for the provincial riding. And I guess the rest is history, you could say.
That's amazing. That 19 years is a long road.
Yeah, it is. It's like, obviously I haven't had any other jobs for that long, but, it changes every day. It changes every week. Everything, as you both know, in politics, there are issues that come and go and issues that come and stay. And, it's been a very interesting and varied kind of career, I guess.
Fair enough. Can you share a couple of memorable moments or achievements from your time in this office?
Well, I like the first issue that was raised when the 33 MLAs were elected in 2005. We'd gone from, I think it was 3 at the time, to 33. And one of the first issues that was raised by the opposition critic for Ministry for Children and Families was Adrian Dix at the time. And he started pressing government on issues around child welfare, including the report that I did, which uncovered quite a few problems with the system. And basically it was a couple of years actually, that we were kind of like questioning government on why did they eliminate independent oversight of the system. And after a lot of pressure, they decided to restore that kind of oversight with the creation of the Office of the Representative for Children and Youth. And, I had a bit of a part to play in the background for that, but that was a pretty significant change. And it seems like a long time ago now, and people may have forgotten. But, back in those days, we were reeling from like serious cuts to social programs, serious cuts to the services that, help people get through challenging times. And so, the opposition, I was in opposition for the first 12 years of my political career, and we were able to point out flaws in the system, deficits in the programs that were being provided to communities. And so I'd say that was something that I was really happy to see. And subsequent to that, I think our government has done a lot of good things in terms of child welfare, the restoration of Indigenous autonomy and the processes for that. That was already happening. Indigenous communities were taking back their authority over how children were cared for, but it stopped under the Liberal government, and then we just picked up where we left off, and now we see legislation that puts it into law that Indigenous communities have the ability to take that authority back. So yeah, that was one of the accomplishments, and a few others in opposition. There was one particular issue that people don't remember, perhaps, but the government brought in regulations that prohibited farmers from selling products from their own farms locally. They were requiring people to basically process all the meat that they raise, all the animals that they raise, through government-approved abattoirs, and that really would have had a really negative impact on local farmers. So I was one of the people. Nothing gets accomplished by yourself in government, but that was one of the things that I worked hard on to try and rectify. And the other one I remember in opposition was government brought in these rules on testing drivers who turned 80, and they used touchscreen computer tests for senior citizens. And I just remember one woman telling me, driving and being able to get around is fundamentally important in our communities. Like, we don't have a lot of bus service, and it's not all easily accessible to everyone. So taking away a person's ability to drive, I thought, needed to be much more thoughtful than just getting them tested on a computer device. And she was demonstrating how she was having trouble with this, because she was showing how she touched the screen, and it was obviously her hand, she was using her fingernails, and she wasn't able to respond as quickly as they would expect. And that kind of thing just seemed to me it wasn't properly thought out. So we fought against that, and ultimately government changed the rules on the Drive Able program, and I was glad about that.
Yeah, there's all these things that happen that I remember when you say Drive Able, I know what that is, but I totally never think, oh yeah, that used to be that way.
Yeah, and other things, I guess, like, obviously ferries are always the number one issue on the coast. And when I was in opposition, we'd have these town hall meetings, a lot of town hall meetings about ferry fares. And it was always about ferry fares. It wasn't about, late sailings, and it wasn't about reservations. And, one of the things that we did when we got into government was reduce fares by 15%. But they'd gone up a lot. They'd gone up a lot for the prior 10 years. So, again, coastal and island MLAs saw the impact of increased ferry fares, and that became a priority of government. And again, we just saw fares go up, in April, but they would have gone up a lot more if the province hadn't put in money into the system. So, there are obviously things that still need to be fixed with our transportation system, but nothing gets accomplished overnight. It's kind of incremental in the progress.
I'm wondering, are you walking away from anything that you were really hoping that you could get accomplished, that you're sad to be walking away from? There's unfinished business, obviously, but I'm confident that whoever represents this riding is going to take it seriously. And that's the issue of water, especially water on the lower Sunshine Coast. And in cooperation with the SCRD, the purveyor of water, I think we're making progress. But, as every summer rolls around, everyone gets a bit more worried. I think the impacts of climate change were felt on the Sunshine Coast kind of, if I can say, a bit earlier than other places in terms of drought. And considering our water storage capacity, that's been something that we've all been concerned about. So I think that progress will continue. And, there weren't my issues, there are our community's issues. That's one of them. Other projects or other
processes that are in place, like reconciliation is an ongoing thing. I think our community has worked really well with the Seashell community and the Squamish community, and I think we're going to continue to see good progress in that regard. So nothing that's going to, like, I'm not going to be turning away from issues. Like, I'll still try and be helpful. So if there are things that I think need work, I'll pop my head back in. Mm-hmm. Maybe obviously not in the political sphere, but as a community member with a bit of experience.
So how do you engage with your community, and do you have any specific advice for those who are trying to foster civic participation?
I have always said that, I like to see community involved in decision making. It's not always the same. Every year is a little bit different. You notice a change in public sentiment. I think COVID really changed the relationship between politics and community, but I don't think irreversibly. So, town halls and interaction with community through those means are still important. I don't do social media as much as I used to. In fact, I'm pretty close to saying, it's not the best place for intelligent discussion of issues. It's often kind of like a dumping ground for people's anger or frustrations. But, I meet with any group that asks to meet with me, and I meet with constituents when they ask to meet. I think that's the best way, just keeping open conversations. And even with groups that may not have the same perspective, it's always good to keep talking. And I think that's something that local governments do as well. I mean, local governments are even closer to the communities, and all the issues that municipal governments and local governments face, and in Seashell's case, Indigenous governments face, are really close to home. So, there are different ways of engaging the community for sure.
When you look at the Lower Sunshine Coast versus Powell River, I mean, we have a lot of shared issues. Are there any specific issues that are different? I've always thought about the Sunshine Coast riding as kind of like fraternal twins. You got a lot in common. There's a lot that looks the same, but they're really quite different. And there's not a lot of interaction between the Upper and Lower Sunshine Coast. I think people from the Cathet Regional District, they see the Lower Sunshine Coast when they're heading to Vancouver. And there are a lot of people on the Lower Sunshine Coast who don't go up to Cathet. And so the other difference is down here on the Lower Coast, every little community has their own specific issues. Like, Elphinstone's different than Roberts Creek, which is, Secret Cove is different from Half Moon Bay.
For sure.
Egmont, Pender, like every community will have their own specific issues. Whereas I would say, and generally speaking, in Powell River, it's the city of Powell River and then north of town, south of town,
Okay.
And so, in a way, the number of issues that we deal with on the Upper Sunshine Coast are fewer, but, obviously geography plays a big role in that. And then, of course, the islands all have their own issues as well, like Savory Island, Texade Island, Gambier, and Keats. So there's a lot of the same issues. Ferries, although, we have 4 ferries in the constituency. One gets a lot of attention. One gets the most weather cancellations. Mm-hmm. We have 3 of the newest vessels in the fleet on this riding, but the Langdale Horseshoe Bay Ferry is often it's the busiest, and so it attracts the most concern in terms of on-time performance and capacity. And I was hearing this morning that there's discussion around 7 new vessels, and they can't come soon enough, I think.
Definitely. I don't think there's anybody in this community that would disagree with that point. Yeah, I mean, you've touched on ferries, drought. Obviously, ferries is very important to the coastal communities here. Drought, I think we're seeing some pretty big effects across the whole province over the last couple of years. Yeah. Especially. Is there anything else that you see as a big key provincial issue that should be important for local communities?
Well, housing. We noticed it here on the Sunshine Coast because, and maybe in other parts of the province, people can drive just a little bit further to get somewhere to live, and they don't have the water in the way. And so housing has been an issue on the Sunshine Coast for a long time. And, it's not something that can be fixed fast, but I think important steps have been made to make more housing available, to build more housing, to provide incentives to local governments, and as well as funding in a lot of cases. But that's a provincial issue. Obviously, healthcare as well. Healthcare, and with global inflation, we've got affordability issues, and that's province-wide. That's much globally,
really.
Yeah. So those are issues that we face. In particular, on the Sunshine Coast, we've got issues around fairness in gas pricing. I think it's been demonstrated that coast residents are being kind of gouged by the gas companies, and it's not the carbon tax, it's the pricing and unexplained profits for Sunshine Coast and Upper Sunshine Coast retailers that I think needs more examination, because frankly, I think, when you always hear about people going, well, I've gone to the island and the gas is 10 cents less per liter, and Lower Mainland, they got the transit tax, which we don't have. Why are our prices so high? But those are provincial issues that we have on the Sunshine Coast, and we have our unique concerns about those issues as well.
Definitely. I almost feel bad having not mentioned housing in the question, but I almost feel like it goes without saying at this point that housing is such a critical issue.
Yeah, it's critical. It's critical to make sure people have a place to live, but it's also, it impacts all sectors of our economy, public sector, private sector, for people looking for workers, for people looking for, whether it's hospitals, police, or restaurants, we need to make sure that we keep building more housing, and that we don't leave homes empty when they could be lived in. And I think that's another issue, the vacancy tax that doesn't apply here, but I think there are a lot of people who think it should.
So you've got so many things I just want to follow up on.
Yeah,
sorry, Brenda.
Yeah.
You said his favorite word.
You sure did. You mentioned the vacancy and speculation tax. I mean, it's been expanded to a number of communities around the province, mostly around, the periphery of our region. Let's be real here.
Yeah.
Do you think that is having the effect that it's intended to in the communities that have been included into the program?
Well, I think the statistics show that more homes have become available for people to rent. The newer communities, I guess it's a bit early to say how they've been impacting, the housing availability. The Sunshine, I think the problem or the issue that the provincial government has is that we're kind of a unique community in that, we got 52,000 people on the Upper and Lower Sunshine Coast, and they have a formula that they use to determine where that tax should apply. And somehow I think they're using that formula on Gibson's as a community by itself, and then as Seashell as a community by itself, not realizing that really
we're one region.
We're kind of like one region, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's something that I've been asked by some representatives to pursue with the Ministry of Finance.
We'll have to have more conversations on that at some point.
I know it's not one of those issues that everyone's going to agree on, but
definitely.
But again, we are in a housing crisis, and it's well documented, and we're not the only jurisdiction with that issue, but we have a tool in the toolbox that we're just using in some places and not everywhere.
Yeah, AVICC at the housing session, Mark Vornash, I think his last name is, with the Strathcona Regional District. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cortez Island?
Yes, yeah.
And they have 246 vacant homes on their island, which is I can't remember.
On one island.
On their, what their total number of homes is, but it's big. So one of the things that is on his wish list is an opt-in ability for a community to opt in, even if they're not on the provincial government list. So you're not the only one thinking about this, Alton.
No, you're not, Alton. I've heard it from others as well.
I bet. I have no doubt. I know we talked about it last term a little bit too. So
How have you seen local government evolve during your tenure, especially in BC?
Well, one thing for sure is we, I guess, collectively decided that 4-year terms were better than 3-year terms. And so that was a change that occurred. I also think that the province has delegated more responsibilities to local government. I don't think, even 15 years ago, because the situation was different, that you'd see the province expecting the local government to deal with issues around, homelessness and healthcare, issues that were always really relegated to the provincial or federal levels. But I think local governments have taken on a considerable amount of responsibility that they previously didn't have. And they're doing it well. And they just need to we need to make sure that they're adequately resourced to deal with those issues. And I think that's the biggest change that I've seen over the last 20 years, for sure.
I like that you use the term delegated, because we usually hear the other D word, which is download.
I know. It has a lot of the same letters in it. But...
You mentioned the 4-year terms from 3-year terms. Do you think that that's something that has actually benefited our local governments and the local elected leaders, or do you think that 3-year terms were better?
I'm not going to personalize it for in this case, I like it. No, I think, I don't know. I haven't really talked to local elected officials about how it impacts, people's willingness to stand for office and such. But it used to be thought that, 3-year terms, it's not a highly paid role. It's, people do work way longer than they get paid for. And so I think that there was a different perspective that, it was just community members getting together and acting as council. And now it's a role with considerable responsibilities. And it's hard to be employed doing other things when you're also elected in local government. So I'm not sure. I guess the jury might be out.
It's an interesting conversation I've had with a few people, because, to serve 2 terms where you're talking about 6 years in total, that's a very different conversation than, 8 years.
It's true.
It doesn't, 2 years doesn't feel like a big difference, but if you're doing 2 terms,
you're in it.
It does when you're in it.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't think it's, look how many people we had run both in 2018.
That's true.
And here, people, it's not scaring people off to do 4 years. And we had 13 or...
Yeah. I don't think it's scaring people off from running for the first time. But it would be really interesting to look at how many people don't run a second time.
That's true.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah. Just you. We have two suckers. Yes.
Hey, wait a minute. I did 19 years.
But you get a pension.
That's true. That's true. I'm starting to find out about that.
Yeah, that's well, that's good. How do you think local government can foster a better sense of community engagement? This goes back to that topic. And if I was ever to sit and do a thesis, it would be on how to engage the community beyond the anger.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you just have to expect it. Sometimes people, that's the way they communicate, and that's fine. But the vast majority of communications, I think, with my office, and I'm hoping that with your office, is most people are, not motivated necessarily by anger. It might be a passion, and it might be an issue that affects them directly, but we're an extension of the community. We live in the community, we represent the community, and we know what our friends and family and neighbors think about issues. And our job is to just use the judgment that we have, that people have put trust in, to make decisions. And I think, engaging with people doesn't always necessarily end in, it's not always a fight. It can be disagreements. We have to accept that and be comfortable with it, that's the way you think about it. That's the way I think about it. And it's not going to always be the same. So, yeah, I think it's good to make sure that, as people go through school, they learn about governance, they learn about the systems, on the Sunshine Coast, I think we've seen examples of young people being involved, having their voices heard. It's a challenge. I think it's nothing new, but it's an ongoing process, I guess.
Were you didn't happen to be at AVICC when our youth spoke, were you?
I heard about it. I am so happy to hear that he gave a good speech, and that he's Kale we're talking about. He and I have had conversations over how to get people involved, and I've offered whatever assistance I could for that. And I hope it's sort of an empowering for him and his colleagues in school. And I think, we're seeing there's an interest, but not everybody's interested in politics, Of course, as you're going through school and high school, people are interested in other things as well. But it's good to see that when somebody's interested, that they're encouraged as well. And I'm glad that, there's a youth council in Gibson's, and I'm sure that kind of idea is going to spread around a little bit.
He had that entire room eating out of his hands. And you know how hard it is to have that room quiet. But I was up videotaping him, and I was looking at the crowd, and they were all either sitting, looking, standing, looking, and he was talking. It was awesome.
Oh, I'd love to see that video.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he did an amazing job, and, made everybody laugh a couple of times. He's very smart. We're quite lucky that he's here on the Sunshine Coast representing the Sunshine Coast when he speaks.
That's good to hear. And I know he was introduced by my colleague Brittany Anderson in the legislature the other day.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, she said, I really want to introduce him. I said, you can introduce him. Go ahead. That's people are looking at me. Why is she introducing Sunshine to the mayor of Gibson's and youth representative? I said, because Brittany's the special advisor on youth issues for the premier.
So. Oh, perfect.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your future.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so Nick, what led to your decision to retire, and what do you see as the future challenges and opportunities for your replacement?
Right. Well, the way I'm looking at it is I'm retiring as MLA, but I'm not like retiring from work. I want to continue to contribute somehow in community. I'm always passionate about child welfare issues, and it's a changing sector, and so I'm hoping that I can help and contribute in that way. But my decision was, 19 years is a long time, first of all, and it's the third leader of the party that I've worked for, and I guess I was minister under John Horgan. It was a great honor, and I think we accomplished quite a few good things. When you see your role sort of, it's not on the upswing anymore, you sort of go, okay, I've hit a bit of a plateau. There's time and room for new voices, new perspectives, and so it's like a constellation of different things that led to it. But I'm happy with my decision. I'm going to miss it because it's pretty intense, and doing something for 19 and a half years, it'll be, I think it's just time for a new voice, and I'm going to encourage whoever it is to, continue to represent as best they can. And so I don't quite know what the future holds.
That's what's exciting about it too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I have some ideas, but...
How many of your MLA colleagues do you have that have been with you the whole way?
I think 4.
Mm-hmm.
4. Doug Routley, who's also not running next election. He represents Couch and Ladysmith. I got the name wrong. He's Doug to me. And he was elected in 2005. Mike Farnworth, the Minister of Public Safety, was there before, and then he was re-elected in 2005, so he's still there. Katrina Conroy, the Minister of Finance, was elected in 2005, and Rob Fleming. Rob Fleming is the Minister of Transportation. I think that's all, and if I'm forgetting one...
You mentioned Adrian Dix.
Oh, and Adrian Dix, of course, yeah. I was going to say, if I'm forgetting one, I'm not sending them this podcast. But, so not a lot of us. But, that's part of the political process. There's renewal, and I think it's probably a good thing.
So, speaking of renewal and your successor, what does the process look like for the NDP to choose a new candidate for this riding?
Yeah, so the party has a constitution. They obviously they know I'm not running again, so they had to start the process of finding a new candidate. People put their names forward, and people who are members of the New Democratic Party on the Sunshine Coast all get a vote. So you have to be a member for 3 months before you're eligible to vote. So that date has passed. So we currently have, close to 700 members or so. And they'll be the ones choosing the new candidate, and they'll do so by electronic balloting.
Okay.
On June 8th.
June 8th?
Yeah, that'll be the date that my successor will be announced. I'll be the MLA until October 19th, or until the writ period, which is 30 days before that or something like that. I should know, but I've been through 5 of these. But so then we'll know who will be running for the party.
Right on.
And what words of inspiration or advice would you give to someone considering a career in politics or local government?
No, I don't know. I would say that if you have a desire to do it and you know what's involved, then put your name forward. You can want to do it, but it's not all up to you. It'll be up to a lot of other people. And every 4 years, you're going to be in for a long job application process with a lot of questions from a big panel of 52,000 people. Well, I guess minus those who are not eligible to vote. But I think it's important. It's important for our system of democracy to add your voice, and your voice can be, specific issues to your community or broader issues that are province-wide. You can influence your government even when you're not at the cabinet table. I used to say, you could listen at the keyhole, pass notes under the door if you're not at the table. But you get to have discussions around policy direction, and you just want to have an impact on public policy in a good way. And a person is so inclined, then I would encourage them.
Very inspirational.
Well,
you sound like you've been doing this a while.
If someone wants to be a musician, I'd just say practice hard. You've got to want to do it. Because there are sacrifices, and so it's not all easy.
Right. So Brenda and I know that you're a musician, but for those of us who are listening that don't know, what do you play?
Oh, I play the cello, and I have since I was 11. So I think my parents were expecting me to be a musician. I've got 5 siblings, and they're all somehow involved in music. I don't think I really enjoyed practicing enough, and that's part of being a musician. You got to really practice. But I'll keep playing, and I do a little bit of teaching, and maybe I'll get more back into that. But I'm not going to become a professional musician. I don't think there are any professional orchestras that'll want me.
No?
Well, maybe.
Not in Powell River?
Oh, that's not a professional orchestra, but maybe one day, yeah. It'll be nice to do other things. You can't take your cello in the floatplane all the time, and it's a bit of a challenge. If I played the flute or something, maybe I'd have kept it up more, but I don't.
What would you like to be remembered for in terms of your contribution to this community and the province?
Well, I hope people saw me as approachable and a good listener, and somebody who could help people resolve issues or get their issue heard. I think that's really an important part of being elected, is to make sure that you can't always fix things, but you can always try. And people who need assistance from government, whether it's services or whether it's regulations or what have you, effort counts for a lot, and gives people some faith in the system, even if I don't make promises I can't single-handedly deliver. So I tell people that and upfront about it. So I hope just that I've been a good representative for the community, that I've reflected their issues, and that would be nice.
Anything else you want to share with us before we say goodbye?
No, it's just other than it's nice to have this conversation, and it'll be fun to watch how things evolve here. And I have great respect for people who take on the role and put themselves out in public for the roses and raspberries, and that we get. And it's an important job, whether people always like you or don't. That's okay. You've got a job to do, and so I've enjoyed having good colleagues in all local governments, Indigenous governments, and quite a few of them over the years. But
Well, we'd like to take this moment to thank you for doing this and for the last 19 years and for your contribution.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks, Alton. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I know we won't be strangers because I'm not going anywhere.
Although hopefully you've got a vacation planned for after October.
Oh yeah, I'm planning not to do too much for a bit. Take a little break and then get back in.
Perfect. Thanks for listening to Locally Speaking, a podcast where two local government officials chat about our regional districts and municipalities that make up local government here in British Columbia. If you aren't following our podcast yet, you can subscribe wherever you consume your podcasts. Maybe you have a topic suggestion for the show, or you want to come and chat with us about what's going on in your area of the province. Drop us a line at locallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com, and let's make it happen.
Locally Speaking is recorded on the traditional territory of the Sechelle Nation.